And with us now around the table, three people who I'm sure have all the answers. CBS News Chief Legal Correspondent Jan Crawford, Dan Balz of the Washington Post, and CBS News Investigative Correspondent Sharyl Attkisson. Sharyl, I want to start with you because you did quite a bit of reporting on this week. You were the one who said, wait a minute, these estimates that they're giving us, this is the low end of the estimate of how much oil is coming out. First, what about the numbers we heard today, and what really is the significance of those numbers?
Well, Commandant Allen, if he's saying that 12 to 19 or 12 to 25,000 barrels a day is the range, the estimate of oil coming out of there as figured by the independent scientists that he hired to do this or that he's tasked, that's incorrect. I have the actual report which shows the plume modeling team said at least 12 to 25,000 barrels a day are coming out of there, and that is the lower bound. They have yet to release the upper bound, which sources tell me will be significantly higher. That has not yet been released by the government. But the government has been treating the low bound as if it's the entire range.
So what's the big deal about that? What difference does it make?
Well, it makes a huge difference to perhaps how the competency of the government looks, but from a financial standpoint for BP, it's the difference between millions of gallons and billions of dollars in fines, because they will be fined ultimately based on some government estimate by how many barrels that they've released, as much as $4,300 per barrel. So in just the first 40 days of this crisis, if you go with the low-end estimates, you're talking about $2 billion for just the first 40 days. If you go with higher estimates, even slightly higher estimates, we're looking at $4 billion, and that's just for the beginning of this. So you can see how important those estimates are.
It really does make a difference. Dan Balz, you know, I've covered a lot of administrations, and every administration has a period where things just seem to go haywire. Nothing seems to go right. But I can't recall a week like the Obama White House has had over these past 7 to 10 days. I mean, it seems like anything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Yes, and the interesting thing about President Obama is this is a politician who has, throughout his career, been blessed with good luck, and that has disappeared at this point. I mean, almost everything, as you say, that could go wrong is going wrong. I thought Admiral Allen was quite right when he said everybody is held hostage to this, and I think first and foremost is the president. But it's not just the oil spill that they're having to deal with. I mean, on problems large and small, everything seems to be going wrong. The jobs report that came out Friday was supposed to be much better than it turned out to be, raising questions about whether the policies in place are really fixing the economy. Little problems cropped up. There are offers of jobs to candidates who were competing in primaries against Democrats favored by the White House popped up. They had to scramble to talk about that. On every front, they seem on the defensive.
And let's not forget the Israelis and what happened in this botched blockade.
Yes, which creates an enormous problem for them in dealing with all of the Middle East problems that they've been slow to deal with in any case.
And Jan, you unearthed some documents this week that certainly gave the White House something else to think about, because while she is eminently qualified, and nobody questions that, there's no question that one reason Elena Kagan was nominated as their nominee to the Supreme Court was because if there's anything the president doesn't need right now, it's a fight, a knockdown, drag out over that. And now, so they thought she would be easily confirmed, I think. But well, you unearthed these documents that show that maybe she is not exactly how the White House had pictured her, that in fact she might be a lot more liberal than people realize.
Right, and these documents have her squarely within mainstream liberal thought. She's worried about the conservative Supreme Court undoing rulings that would give a woman a right to an abortion. She's worried about gun rights, saying she's not sympathetic to an individual's right to own a handgun. She's concerned about some conservative rulings scaling back rights of criminals. That's basic mainstream liberal thought. But the White House's reaction to this, to these revelations, I think has been astonishing, and it goes, I think, to kind of the week that they've had. Their reaction has been to push back so strongly on allegations, as they would put it, that she's a liberal. Like there's something wrong with that. Like it's a smear to say their nominee is a liberal. And I think that suggests one of two things. Number one, they're either so weakened right now politically, the president's numbers are in the tank, that they just do not want to fight, so they're trying to portray her as something other than what she is. Or number two, they think Americans don't want a liberal justice and maybe are more sympathetic to conservative outlook on the law. regardless, I mean, whatever one it is, and it's one of the two, they're doing Elena Kagan an enormous disservice. And it's also insulting to Justices Breyer and Ginsburg, who've written eloquently and passionately about why a liberal interpretation of the Constitution is the right way to go. It is a dangerous game this White House is playing. They're putting enormous pressure on Elena Kagan, who, as you said, is qualified. She's an intellectual superstar. They're putting pressure on her to portray herself in these hearings as something other than what she is. They're thinking short-term politically and not long-term for the court and the law and liberal judicial philosophy.
We should point out that these memos that you unearthed are memos that she wrote when she was a young clerk for Thurgood Marshall, who, of course, was a liberal lion. And all of this is now coming out. Now, during her confirmation for Solicitor General, she talked about her views in those days as saying, look, I was a pipsqueak. I was just a kid, basically, and I was working for this liberal icon. I suppose that is the defense that the White House is going to take. But this is, at the least, is going to give Republicans something to ask a lot of questions
Oh,
about.
Absolutely. I mean, these hearings have now gotten much more interesting than a lot of people thought they were going to be going into the summer, when it was going to be a yawn. Republicans have a lot. She's taken on every social issue in these documents, and there's more to come. We're going to get another 100,000 or so documents from the Clinton Library when she worked there as a young lawyer. But the suggestion that somehow a smear to call her a liberal is just baffling to me.
Dan, where do they go from here?
Well, I mean, I think one of the problems, and Jan pointed to it, is that this is a year in which there's much more energy on the right than on the left in terms of the November midterm elections. Midterm elections are decided by the side that has more passion and energy, and right now that's on the conservative side. If this Supreme Court nomination fight and these confirmation hearings turn into another example of energizing the right, that's bad news for the Democrats in the fall.
Do you think we're going to see Barack Obama down on the coast a lot more?
I think we will, and I thought that the visit on Friday was certainly better than the visit the previous week. It's interesting, this White House has been slow in trying to figure out both the optics of how you deal with this and the practicalities of it. But I mean, the amount of time and energy that's going into it has not translated with the American people in a sense that they feel that the White House really is fully in command, fully in charge. And if this continues to gush oil into the late summer and early fall, I mean, and then the cleanup and then the economic reconstruction, I mean, becomes a central part of the Obama presidency.
Sharyl, what do you think is going to happen now? What can we expect on this?
Well, I think the government will continue on all levels to try to look like they're getting in front of this, which will be hard to do because the initial perception was that they were not. And almost every action that comes now appears, whether it is or not, reactionary instead of proactive, but they're going to try to continue to get ahead of it. I recommend they post documents on the oil flow estimates, which they haven't posted yet, but they promised to do. They come clean with a lot of questions we've asked about how these numbers are being calculated, and they quit stalling and giving the appearance, whether true or not, that they may have an interest, the government, in lowballing these figures.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being with us this morning.